Casual Magic has been sponsored by Quiver, maker of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine deck holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their website for 10% off your order. We're also sponsored by Architect, the premier site for hosting your decks on the internet. I love them and they love me, and it seems like a good reason for you to use them. You can also support Casual Magic directly by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/ShivamB. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam Bhatt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Architect and Quiver and my patrons at patreon.com/ShivamB. Today, I'm super excited because I have somebody who I've wanted to talk to on this show since about the time I started this show, give or take. The author Kate Elliott, who wrote maybe one of my favorite all-time arcs in Magic, which was the Bolas and Ugin origin story, which is like one of the greatest stories ever. Oh my God. And also like Will and Rowan and, the wonderful Eldraine stories that were put out there. And I'm thinking like it was an ebook at the time, right? Like there was
it was, yeah.
Yeah. And she also gave me a copy of her new book, The Witch Roads, to read, which I just finished yesterday. And so we're going to be talking about that too, because it's hella cool. And I love reading ARCs a lot. Hello, friend. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited. We first met on old Twitter.
Yes.
Before times.
In the
golden years, the golden age. And I have to say, one of the things that I love so much about your Twitter feed, and I guess Blue Sky now, although I don't see that as much now, but is that your long threads about different religious figures, right, and the history behind them, and not everybody
traditions and stuff.
Yeah, not everybody's comfortable talking about religion, but I am, and you were, and I really appreciated that.
Honest to God, like Twitter is where I found my actual medium. Like I've been a writer for a long time and I've been a journalist. I've done all these things, but Twitter was where I realized that telling stories bite-sized while people are following along and refreshing and, just sitting there waiting for me to go. And that's where I learned that the kind of storytelling that I do is perfectly suited for this micro medium, because you can sit there and you can put a pause in between tweets. And then people just sit there and they're like waiting on bated breath for your next sentence. And Hindu stories are long. Like, I don't know if you noticed this, but nearly every one of them, to be able to contextualize it for people, I have to start at the beginning of time.
That's right.
Get to hear. And I just love, I'm a hereditary priest and a storyteller. And this is the sort of stories I just grew up on and I love sharing with people. And in a less chaotic time, I would be putting much more of those threads on Blue Sky, but it seems like every 4 minutes the world ends again. So It's like, okay, I'm gonna wait till I'm in a better mood to be able to go back to those.
Yeah, I hope that we can all find the space to do joyful things also, because we also need that in our lives, even as we struggle with the darker and more difficult and often scary things or terrifying things. But we've got to also have that joy, that, enjoying the ocean.
Yes.
One thing I do, I'm an outrigger canoe paddler, which is a big deal in Hawaii, especially for those who do it. But 3 to 4 times a week, I go out on the ocean, and there is something deeply healing about the ocean, because it's beautiful, and it also is completely indifferent to us and to everything that's going on with us. Yeah. I mean, one could argue that environmentally it isn't, and that's also something important that we humans have to grapple with. But when you're out on the water, it's like everything can kind of slide away from you like water, off a duck's feathers. And I need that.
Yeah. Every place I've ever lived has been within half an hour at best away from the water. And I can't not do, like, that was like when I got married and when we moved into our house, I was like, I got to be able to get to the bay or the ocean at some way, I can't deal with not having like I need to be able to see the waves hit the water and
Yeah.
just kind of come back and come back and come back, because there's a meditation in that. There's like a breathing that you get of, you
Yeah.
see the planet kind of just inhale and exhale and coming and slamming down. And in my tradition, there's this notion of like, doing your mala, doing your rosaries, and each bead you're reciting the name of the Lord, and you're going through these things 108 times. And when you're sitting there on the banks of the ocean, and you're like just watching this rhythmic pattern, the repetition of the word coming over and over again, it is a full body meditation. And that's, yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yes. And in addition to the fact that it's the repetition over and over, no pattern of waves breaking on the beach is ever the same.
Nope.
So it's the same and never the same.
Yeah.
And to me, there's such an important lesson to be understood there, or again, try to be understood there.
I mean, because one of the things I try to remind people is that even when you're living in the darkest times and just like you're getting battered over and over again by more bad news than you can handle, by like from every direction, wherever you want to look in the world, there's something awful happening, and you're just like getting rocked by this, right? Like you're just, it's like you're getting eroded away. But you've got to stop, you got to breathe, you got to sit there and say like, look, man, they're pretty flowers. There's a rock. There's a really cool, like, peas growing on my plant over there. Something. You've got to be able to go take a walk, eat an ice cream, and just be chill and be like, you know what? It's not the worst thing in the world right now. Like,
well, yeah, you can, or say, I'm going to bake some bread. I'm going to do something. I'm going to straighten up something in my house, or go do a beach cleaning, or I'm going to write something. I'm going to create something. I'm going to sew
organize your magic card, for Christ's sake.
But anything that's action as opposed to
passive absorption.
Yeah.
You're right, because the act of doing gives you something. I mean, as tautological as it sounds, the act of doing gives you something to do.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're doing, and in doing, your mind gets something else to occupy itself. And that's part of the joy, I think, of parenting too. It's like, I can't sit and be too maudlin all the time, because my 11-year-old has needs that need to be dealt with right now. And I don't have time to sit and mope.
Yeah. And it's funny now because my kids are all adults now. And so sometimes I will, because I'm more on social media than they are. They're like, nah, we're not doing any of that stuff.
Smart.
Yeah, they are smarter than me. And sometimes I'll come on and I'll go, oh my gosh, I just read blah, blah, blah. And they'll go, Mom, calm down. We saw this other thing about that. And that's just somebody freaking out. It's not really that, whatever. So they're like talking me down.
Yes.
So that's a good lesson too, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like when I go to my therapy sessions and I'm talking to my therapist, and it's weird because like as a priest and stuff, I handle his role a lot for other people. So when I'm talking to my therapist, it's kind of like, doctor, heal thyself type of thing. But he's like, look, dude, real talk. How much of that is impacting the specific nature of your exact life right now? Like where you're at, where you are mentally, where you are physically, the things you have to deal with in your life. How much of this, atmosphere of nonsense is immediately something you need to tackle? If not, take a breath and figure it out, and take a breath, look at where you're at, look at your situation, look at your family, your friends, and then take a breath. And it's like, you cannot allow yourself to get pulled. I mean, we've been using ocean metaphors a lot, but yeah, you can't get pulled under the undertow. Sometimes you got to sit back and sit on the beach and just be like, okay, hang on. I'm going to let the beach the waves calm down. Then I'll go back in. I don't need to be there right now with the riptide and the crazy rocks and stuff.
Yeah. The other thing that I think about a lot, and that actually the last 6 months have clarified a lot for me, is that my emotions don't accomplish anything.
They sure don't.
If I'm enraged, or if I'm dooming, or if I'm in despair, nothing changes. It just hurts me. So, and I think outrage is fine.
Yeah.
And I think feelings of despair are normal. But what I think about is, okay, what can I do? What
Yes.
small thing can I do? I can do something for myself, or I can say, write to my congressman, or I can, give some money to this organization, or I can volunteer. I can do, and every small thing that people do
Yes.
is to me matters. On the
Yeah.
deepest level, I can talk to someone about it. I mean, it just, that's all better than just stewing in the emotion. And that is one of the
Yes.
things that social media these days encourages too much, which is stewing in the emotion. If you feel
Boy.
strongly, then that's more important than doing anything, but it
Yes.
doesn't accomplish anything.
There's a saying that my friends and I use on our message board that I know message board's ancient, but like we're old until we hang out there, which is posting isn't praxis.
Yeah.
Just posting things is not the act of doing something or getting anything done.
Yeah.
It's good to spread information. It's good to share things that are happening, but at some point you've got to actually do something. And in doing things, you get your adrenaline, you get your, endorphins running. You actually feel your body doing something instead of just absorbing. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to sit there and say like, well, you shouldn't feel worried and you shouldn't be that, because of course we're all worried, dude. I'm waiting for the deportation squads any day now, right? Like, come on, real talk.
Seriously.
Like, I mean, but the thing is, then I think about the fact that the reason I'm in this country is because the reason I was even born in this country is because my dad fled India because he was a right-wing agitator for like the Hindu, like he was trying to agitate for statehood for Gujarat, which is a state that are ancestrally from, and for like, Hindu rights after independence and stuff like that. And the left-wing, not left-wing, but like she was just centrist dictator Indira Gandhi, who was running the place, was running out and like putting out castration squads and putting out like, just like death squads to get all these people who were trying to agitate and throw them in jail. And my dad's older brother was in America, and he was working for a young senator from Delaware named Joe Biden, and he asked his boss to write a letter to the INS to help my dad immigrate to this country because they didn't want to let an agitator in. And he did. And my dad was able to come here and become a college student and bring my mom over. And then I'm very safe and sound away from crazy town, And then Indira Gandhi got assassinated and weird things happened in India, but that's a different podcast.
No, but wow.
Yeah, isn't it sick? It's so cool. It's so cool.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so like when I'm looking at the stuff that we're dealing with now, I'm like, you know what? My direct family has dealt with this before. We can do it again. It won't be fine, but it's not going to be like the end times right now.
My personal feeling is that it's bad and it's going to get worse, but that in the end, in the medium term, into the long term, we're going to prevail.
Yeah.
I have no question about that. It's just, I don't know how. And frankly, I intend to outlive those people.
Right. Like, look, dude, I'm a patient person. I'm a Hindu. We believe in very long scales of time.
Very long scales of time.
I'm in no rush to do anything, and I've got more important things to do right now. But we should rerail the conversation.
Oh yes. Okay. Sorry, we spent our allotted time on politics. So
you know what? It's not.
But it's unliving.
It's unliving, and like, I mean, that's part of why I do this show at all, is because when I started this show was like literally 2 months before lockdown happened. And when lockdown happened, I was like, what am I going to do? I can't go meet people to interview them. And then I realized this gives me an hour that I can guaranteed sit and talk to a human who doesn't live in my house. And we can just sit and have a nice, normal conversation and think about what it was like in the old times when we used to just be able to hang out. And it worked. And you know what? If I can do anything, which is if the thing I do is bring levity to people, then that's the thing I'm wholeheartedly here to do. Yeah. And as a writer of many, many fantasy and fiction books, you are also somebody who brings levity to people. So let's talk about you for a second, because people know who I am.
My least favorite subject. One of the reasons I love writing, by the way, is that I subscribe to the Jane Austen school, which is that nothing of me should be in my books. Now, obviously, a lot of me is in my books, but Jane Austen it's like she's never at the front of her books, right? She's always at the back of her books. So who she is permeates what she writes. But she's never someone who's like inserting a lot of herself in there. And that's how I've always felt as about a writer. It's like, you don't need to know about me. Here's my books.
So you're saying that you're not secretly Nicol Bolas running around?
Well, that's a different issue, but I can't speak about that.
Yeah. So
I can't. So do you want to know how I got that gig?
Yeah, because the story rules and I need to know.
So here's how I got that gig. So first of all, as we know, at some point in 2017 or 2016, I don't know, Magic made a decision to kind of do something a little different with their story, the lore story stuff. And they decided to bring in some outside writers. And there was that one novel, there was a pair of novels that were written because they were doing the whole Bolas sequence. And then they had to set it up. So they contracted with Martha Wells to do the 12 episode Dominaria sequence.
Yes.
And that was she was the first one, right? That was the first outside writer brought in.
Originally, Alison Luers and the folks inside Wizards did the full arc leading towards Ixalan, and then she finished that arc up, and then Wizards decided that it wanted to contract out external authors, and then Martha Wells came in to do Dominaria, which came out, I think, at the beginning of 2018.
Yeah, it did come out at the beginning. It was like January through April. So anyway, I know Martha. I've known Martha for quite a while, since long before her
Murderbot success.
Her lovely. Yeah, I'm so thrilled for her. Frankly, I'm so thrilled for her. And also, people should watch Murderbot, the TV show. If you read the books, the books are great, and the TV show so far, I'm also really enjoying because they're like two different things. But yeah. So, anyway, they must have asked Martha, hey, do you have any suggestions? Because we have these further things we want to do. So she gave them my name. And they contacted me and said, we're looking for someone to do this sequence. And it's kind of under a tight deadline. And it's, this is how much we pay. And I said, okay, so what would it be about? And they said, well, we want to tell the backstory of this character, Nicol Bolas. Now, you have to understand that my kids play Magic and played it when they were kids. So when they were, teens, I learned the basic rules. I'm not a gamer. I'm an athlete. So I can't sit that long. I don't have the patience. So I learned, I'm sure I played a couple games with them. So I knew Magic the Gathering. And I was actually at the launch party in like Seattle Worldcon in the 1990s when Wizards of the Coast was launched. They had a big party.
Back in 1992, 93, something
yeah. That long ago. Because a friend of mine was their first like editorial director or something for a couple of years. Yeah. So I knew all about Magic the Gathering. So I went to my kids and I said, I've just been asked if I wanted to do this, work for hire job. And they're like, well, what would the subject matter be? And I said, it would be the backstory of this character called Nicol Bolas. And my eldest said, Mom, you have to do it. And I'm like, okay, that's good enough for me. Right. So I said yes. And then I did I did a lot of reading.
Like, what do they do? Do they just give you like all the old novels and everything and say good luck?
No, I don't think I just read everything online I could find.
That's fair.
And not all of it was directly related to Bolas, right?
Yeah.
But I did a lot of it. And the stuff that I liked best was the stuff on, oh my God, you know what? I've written so many books since then.
Yeah.
What's the planet that it takes mostly?
Tarkir.
Tarkir, thank you. Oh my God.
I've got your story open just in case you need any questions.
Thank you. I will have many questions. I can remember all the stuff, but I can't remember all the details, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, of course.
Anyway, the Tarkir stories, which were written by Alison Luers, aren't they?
The original Tarkir stories were written by, God, no, it wasn't by Luers. It was before that. The original Tarkir stories are here. They were written by a lot of people. It was by the in-house team entirely.
Right. So I read of all the stories I read, those were the ones that I liked the setting, and
It's a cool setting.
It is a cool setting, and it appealed to me a lot. And but what was great was what they wanted was they didn't give me let me rephrase that. They gave me a lot of leeway. They didn't give me a plot. They said we were thinking of
They didn't give you a plot. They just said like, "Hey, write about Bolas, whatever you want."
We want the backstory, and we thought it would work well as a frame story. So the idea they had for the frame didn't appeal to me. So I said, "Well, what if I set the frame story on Tarkir because I liked Tarkir?" Right?
Yeah,
and then I could use the elements that I liked in that, and then. But the thing is that the history, the prehistory, that's never covered of the dragons.
Yeah.
It's like I pretty much had free reign to just do what I wanted. I don't even know if I'm supposed to say that.
No, we all know it because the fact that when the cards came out, so this was part of Core Set 19. And if you guys haven't read it, the stories are still on Wizards and they're absolutely phenomenal. And God, the interplay between the brothers is so beautiful.
Well, I have twins.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, I have 3 children, my eldest, and then twin boys.
Oh, well, then you understood.
Yes, I understood. Except mine get along, but
Yeah, but the thing is, like,
still.
So we know who Ugin was. Ugin was like, the father of dragons on Tarkir and this and that. We had no connection between Ugin and Nicol Bolas at all. That did not exist until you created it. And the thing was like, because that set that came out, it released the original Elder Dragons from Legends, Arcady Sabbath and Nicol Bolas and friends, as their younger versions, and then gave Nicol Bolas the ability to flip into a planeswalker. And we were all like, we just read this insane, incredible story. Where's the Ugin card? And the card designers were like, we developed the cards before we saw the story. We didn't know that Ugin was going to be the twin of Bolas. And I'm like, this seems like a big oversight that you should have fixed.
Yeah, well, anyway. So one of the things,
everybody loves it, so don't feel bad about that.
I'm happy with it. Actually, what I loved was I grew up reading all those old fashioned stories, besides Lord of the Rings, which was kind of my, my text, right? Yeah. All those old sword and sorcery stories. And this was me going into all that old sword and sorcery stuff I read as a teenager. And I could, because it's sword and sorcery. That's the whole 100%. Elder Dragon stuff is just all sword and sorcery stuff.
Yes.
It's written that way. It's got that tone. It has that kind of, that it's big, it's bombastic and ridiculous and, violent, and it has all those things.
I grew up on Conan and Dragonlance and, Anne McCaffrey and everything. And so this definitely had that resonance.
Yeah. And I was just writing deep into that element of my influences when I did it. And it was fun because I don't really write into the rest of my work. I have never really gone deep into a big sword and sorcery vein like that.
So you got to really just explore and enjoy yourself.
I just got to enjoy myself. And to me, the best part of writing, and I think the most engaging writing I write, is when I'm super enjoying myself when I write it. Because some of that comes across, in the material, I think. So I got to, when you're dealing with a legendary time, there's just really nothing you can't do. And
fair.
And when you're thinking about that, the other thing that happened is a lot of people getting the spark, right? A lot of times it's associated with the violence. In fact, most of the time, I killed someone next to me was killed.
I was about to get killed,
whatever. And that's fine. But I honestly wanted to explore what it would mean to get the spark for a different reason, and for a reason that dovetailed with the essential personality of that person. So Bolas gets the spark out of sheer enraged jealousy
Jealousy.
that his brother can do something he can't. And that somehow he feels like his brother's not sharing it with him.
Oh my God, dude.
Even though he can't. And because to me, why does it have to be? I mean, to me, that gets deeper in than violence does. Violence is just an external characteristic. It's not that it is. I mean, what happens to I'm not trying to in any way say that violence isn't terrible. It is, and that it doesn't have terrible uses. It does. But in terms of getting the spark, to me, that felt like it would not only get Bolas the spark, but it would then permeate everything about how he lives from then on.
And it fits so well because, of course, he is the ego monster. He is the pure essence of, if not me, then who? And like, it just fits so much that his story, his spark, like I've got that passage actually up right here, which is, how dare he claim to be better than me? How dare he flaunt the magic that he refused to share, And it's just like this just dripping like contempt and just disgust that his brother could possibly have anything that Bolas doesn't have. And you can just see him take all of the just anger and jealousy and rage and just compress it into himself until he literally lights on fire. And that just fits so much. And like, you could totally see him just exulting in being the king of assholes. And it's so good. And especially like the way the story was laid out, that they put like Bolas and Ugin's words in a different font in caps in this kind of offset nature to give you this otherworldliness. It was, goddamn, it was a good story.
Thank you. I really enjoyed writing it. I have to say my one disappointment was that when they were like going with titling it, right? The overall story, I said, and I'm so sorry this didn't happen. I get why they didn't do it, but I said the story should be Chronicle of Ugin. And then there should be this claw slash across it and Bolas written in blood across it. But I think it was too, they just wanted to put
I think it would have been a little much.
I think in terms of design and having to, do that, it was.
Yeah.
But
it's just like, simpler. Because these characters are so fundamental to Magic. Like, when I started playing in 1994 or whatever, the Elder Dragons were like the thing that so check this out. This set had come out maybe like 4 months before I started playing it. It was instantly sold out. So all these cards, when I was in like middle school, were talked about in whispers and hushed tones of like, they're these gigantic dragons that are insane. And I'm a dragon fiend at that age. So when I finally see these original Elder Dragons, and I still have my set of them from when I was a child, like Nicol Bolas and Arcade Staff, these were like attention grabbing, like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And he's been a big threat through the entire history of Magic. So when we finally get his backstory, it's something I, as a like at that time, I guess mid-30s-year-old guy, was sitting there going like, I've waited my whole life to find this story out. And sometimes when you wait, it doesn't pay off, but this one did. And I was like, that's so sick. It ties everything together. It makes it super cool. It tells us why Ugin is who he is. It tells us why Bolas. And that's like one of the few times I was like, the cards let us down. The cards didn't live up to the story.
Oh, they did. They did, though. It was just the way that it was timed. The timing was.
It would have been so cool.
Yeah. I actually, soon after the first, I don't know, it was the first or second installment came out, someone mocked up a card with a baby dragon on it, and then the name of the spell was Stuck. And I felt like that was like the most complimentary thing that I had ever received.
God, dude, I don't know. That's when I became that was my introduction, and a lot of our introductions to you as a writer. And I was just like, damn, you're good at this. And I realized that can sound backhanded, but it was more like, wow, just the sheer like artistry involved just gave weight to your experience as a writer. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. So
I will say actually that I'm glad that I didn't do work like this early in my career, because the nice thing about doing it when I did it, which was in 2018, and then with the Eldraine story in 2019, was that I brought a lot of experience to it. And because the time frame was really short, and you have to know what you're doing. if you're writing in that short of a time frame, and you have to have some confidence that you can make it work and that your brain is, can fit all the pieces together.
Right. Like you need to know your craft in order to be able to do this. And I think that it shows. Like you said in the beginning, you're like, I don't know how to write short stories, but this is obviously a novella. This is a short story. You've got the beats to it.
It's actually, I'm trying to remember. It's actually a short novel in length. It was supposed to be shorter, but I couldn't. I struggled. Both of them are a little longer than they wanted, but oh well.
Sometimes I look at them. I look at these people's like, oh yeah, we have word restrictions. I'm like, the internet is infinite, buddy. You why are you putting a restriction on it? Let them tell the story they want to tell. Because I remember I used to sit in my parking lot at work just right before on like every Wednesday when the story come out, and I'd be scrolling through my phone just reading the whole damn thing. And my bosses were like, it's taking you a long time to get in every Wednesday. And I'm like, look, they write it, I read it, and then I'll come to work. Shut up, okay? It's good times.
Talk to the suits at the office and tell them to drop it an hour earlier.
Yeah,
if you want me on time.
Exactly right. Like, sorry, buddy, I can't help you here. But you've written so much more beyond just these books, and like, I mean, you've written. When did you start writing?
Like, well, I mean, I started writing as a child. I guess, I was drawing maps and writing fragments of stories. And I think I've just always been writing and always been making up worlds. I'm just kind of I like to say I'm a world building dork. And I did that all, oh my gosh, since like 9 or 10. So my first published novel came out in December 1988.
Damn.
And I have been writing been writing steadily since then. So Witch Roads is, it's like my 31st or 32nd published novel.
That's kind of sick.
And that's not, I think that's not counting the Two Wizards books, which I probably should count because they are novel length.
I mean, they exist, they're published.
Yeah. So I'm probably up to like 34 now. That's something like, I don't know.
That's awesome. Like, that's hella cool. Because, you know what? I had read something else by you. Because I was a huge Melanie Ron fan when I was growing up. And I had read the compilation or the like kind of
Golden Key,
collaboration that you guys did together. Yeah. Man, she was like one of my favorite authors when I was a kid, and I got to meet her at a signing, and I was like, your magic system is so amazing. And she's like, what's a magic system? And I'm like, don't worry about it. It's still amazing.
She's great. And, she's one of she was such a huge name in the 90s and into the early aughts, before she mostly stopped publishing, unfortunately. But, and I think she's not given enough credit for the influence she had on readers and on writers.
Dude, her Dragon Prince, Dragon Stars saga.
Those were huge.
Absolutely. I mean, there are definitely some parts of it which are like, I don't know if they hold up necessarily, but overall the stories were just absolutely delightful and wonderful. I had read The Golden Key like 1,000 years ago when I was in my read everything Melanie Ron has written phase of my life. Did you ever
figure out who wrote which section?
No, and if I did, I was like,
do you want to know?
Years. Yeah.
Do you want to know? Jennifer wrote the first section, which is the early court one, and then the middle section, which is basically the Princess Diana section, is Melanie, and then I wrote the one about the revolution.
That's super cool.
Which is so we each kind of did our thing, right? It was very much our personalities in each of those sections.
That's rad. So how would you characterize your books? Because I remember you wrote like a weird space fantasy about Alexander the Great last year or the year before, didn't you?
So I'm not quite done with that. It's a trilogy, and it's gender flipped Alexander the Great in space.
Yeah, it's like, where do you come up with that idea?
Well, one of my sons is named Alexander, so I'm kind of an Alexander fangirl because Alexander's so interesting because he's both. What I like to say about Alexander is he's both the protagonist and the antagonist in one person, and that makes him so interesting.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, because I was going to say one of my favorite anecdotes of Alexander the Great is that he left when he came and did war, and like at the end of his life, and he made it to India, and he's at the cusp of the northeast and he's or the northwest, and he's fighting such a aggressively strong war that his name became legend in the culture. And like Alexander, when in North Indian languages, became Sikandar, but when
Yeah.
Sikandar's name flowed down and the legends of his war and his prowess and his like potency kind of made it down to the bottom south of the coast, it shrunk to Skanda, which became one of the epithets of the god of war in Hinduism, aka
Ah,
Subramaniam, or, in the south,
wow.
like the main Tamil god is like Skanda, who is this young man with a spear, who
Oh
is like,
my
the
gosh.
permanent virgin,
Yeah.
who like, and he's just like, dedicated to war, the second son of Shiva. And yeah, they gave him like Skanda, the god of war, comes from Sikandar, comes from Alexander the Great, who came
But it
from
makes
Macedonia.
perfect sense because he left India from the South Coast.
Yeah, and there were his just
Yeah.
the legend of this guy was just so resonant and powerful
Yeah.
that it imprinted itself forever on this culture, and I think that's kind of sick.
Well, and what's so interesting about him, I mean, is because really no one beat him except himself.
Mm,
His own whatever it was that drove him to do all these things, and his it
yeah,
he couldn't rule, but he could conquer and fight, right?
yeah.
But he didn't know, and he wasn't interested in ruling. He wasn't interested in, I'm going to consolidate my empire and then I'm going to settle down on my throne and have
No,
20
he's
years
he's
of
a keep
peace and
going forward.
prosperity. Yeah, he had to keep moving. So I just decided to,
He's a forest fire, is what he is.
yeah, yeah, that's actually a great analogy. I just wanted to do an Alexander the Great story, but in my own way.
So you
Which
put
meant
it in
gender
space.
flipping it and putting it in space. And actually, so what's really interesting about that trilogy? So I'm actually working on the first two books are out. The first one's called Unconquerable Sun. The second one's called Furious Heaven. They're a cast of thousands, multi-threaded novel. There's so much going on in them. And then I'm about halfway through the third one, which has taken longer to write because it's so complicated, and actually really challenging. Uh, but where was it? Oh, so originally that idea comes from, so this is not a spoiler, but after in the history, after Alexander dies,
Yes.
the actual Alexander dies, his generals fight over the conquest for like 30 years. They were
Yep.
all terrible, terrible people. The most rapacious people you could imagine, with just
Yeah. They were.
awful. They were awful people. Well, I mean, and they'd been at war for 12 years. So who knows what that does to a person also, right?
And there's a lot of
And
walking,
a
right? Like
lot of walking, a lot of walking. And so I don't know why. So I sometimes read romances. I especially like Regency romances. That's one of them. And I mostly read science fiction, fantasy. That's like my preferred genre. But I sometimes read mysteries. I sometimes read romances. Very rarely, maybe a thriller. Very rarely, maybe a literary novel or whatever we call those, right?
I
Some
Yeah.
historical novels. I mean,
Sure.
novels written 50 years ago or more, right?
Right.
So I had been reading it, so there was a phase in Regency romance where these things develop where you would have like the five siblings, and then each of, they're a family of, lords and ladies, and then each of them gets their own book, which is their own romance. And I thought to myself, what if I set it's called the Diadochi are the successors of Alexander. I
Right.
said, what if I did a space opera that was the Diadochi in space, but I framed it with like each one gets like a love story. So the first book would be about, so and so, and the second would be about,
Huh.
Antigonus, and then Ptolemy, and then
Sure.
Seleucus or whatever, right? And then I'm like, okay, well, that could be interesting. So I started making some notes. Things churn in my mind for a couple of years before I actually start writing them. I'll make notes. I'll like test write little, 1,000 words, or try things out, decide I don't like it, go back. So each time I return to this, I would say, okay, this works, but where does it start? Does it start after the death of the Alexander character? And I'm like, okay, that will be work. And then I'm like, no, we think we need to see the Alexander character. Okay, so maybe the Alexander character will die, a quarter of the way into the first book. And then I'm like, well, maybe that's not enough to understand why, because the point of the Diadochi, and one of the things that I love about them, is that they would do things like have meetings where they would set Alexander's armor, the dead Alexander's armor on his throne.
Yeah.
And then they would have the meeting below there. So they just, for decades, it was like it was still Alexander's empire, and they were just fighting over it. It's so fascinating. And then but the problem is that Alexander is Alexander. So
you're trying to tell a whole story.
I'm trying to say that it was like, okay, not a third. Okay, how about halfway through the first book, Alexander will die? Well, wait, how about at the end of the first book, Alexander? Well, how about at the end of the second book, Alexander? And then all of a sudden, the trilogy was about the Alexander character.
It's like you're trying to write a story about the moons of Jupiter without mentioning Jupiter. Eventually, you're going to realize Jupiter is the story.
Exactly. And so there we were. And that's what it became. And so be it. That's the creative process. You have to let it go where it goes.
Yeah. So then tell me about the Witch Road so that your agents don't get mad at us.
Oh, right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's 9:50. We've been talking a long time.
Yeah. Goodness. I mean, look, I could talk to you for as long as you feel like talking to me, man.
Okay. So this story is what I'm going to tell quite a bit. So in the spring of 2022, for reasons that I'm not going to describe, I had what I'll call the dark night of my creative soul. And I had about a month where I thought maybe it's just done. Maybe I should just quit. There's very specific reasons for why it happened, which I'm not going to share.
Sure.
But I really thought that there was no point in continuing to write. I was so discouraged. And I always have like multiple little pans on the back burners that are like, some of them are cold and some of them I threw out, 10 years ago. And some of them have mold in them and some of them are simmering very low. And maybe a couple of them are a little farther forward because every once in a while I'll circle back every couple of months and poke at them and think, oh, let me think about this story a little bit. Let me write a little something here and see. No, I don't want this to be the main character. Maybe that will be. So this kind of goes on, as I said, this is how things percolate for me for a couple of years before something I realize, yes, can really be the stew, right? This is the stew I'm cooking for tonight's dinner. And
the author Tad Williams once told me it was like a dung beetle rolling a piece of crap around forever and ever and ever until it becomes large enough to actually be like, there's a story.
Oh, that's so funny. Tad's an old friend. I love him. I've known Tad since I got started in this business. So.
Yeah, Tad's been a dear friend of mine for many, many years. I've gone to his house, hung out. He was on the show earlier this year. I love him.
He's a good one.
Absolutely,
he's one of the good
lovely
ones.
Guy. Yeah.
So rather than like just completely give up, because there's a part of me that never wants to give up, I thought, well, let me just go poke at something. So I went back and I poked at this one thing that I had been poking at like 4 different times and switching things up. And I had this idea in my head that I wanted to tell a sequence of fantasy stories from the points of view of what we'll call the underlings, the little people, the servants, so that these earthquaking situations and events happen, but we see them from the people, not from the people who are ruling. Because I love to write about empire, and I'm writing, a space opera about Alexander the Great, where we're right in the middle of it, right? But and that idea, and then these 2 other ideas kind of converged on the character of Ellen. So I have her, she's walking, she's a deputy. I thought, what is she? Oh, she's a deputy courier. She walks these things up through the hills where there isn't a road, where horses, that these other, where wheeled traffic can't go.
Yes.
And and I thought, oh, this is okay. This isn't so bad. I'll just write a little bit on this, and then maybe, I don't know, and so I wrote a little more, and she was with her nephew, and
Yes.
and I wrote a couple chapters, and I gave them to my writers group, and they said, oh, we're really enjoying this, and I thought, well, I'm kind of enjoying it too. It's like, because it wasn't under contract. Nobody was waiting for it. There was no expectation. I was doing it like I used to write when I was a teenager, just for fun. And I thought, no, I got to go back and do this thing that makes me want to
not right anymore.
Well, I don't want to. I don't want to use the violent metaphor that I'm thinking of. So yeah, not write anymore. Give up writing. And I thought, well, if I don't do anything, I'll do nothing. And this gets back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, right? If I don't do anything, I'll do nothing.
Yeah.
If I work on this, even though I won't be doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing, at least something will be happening. So I gave myself permission to not work on the thing I was contracted with that I couldn't work on anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I'll just write a little more. I'll just give myself a week to work on this. And that week turned into 3 weeks. And then I kept writing. And it was like as soon as I let myself do that, as soon as I said, I'm writing this for my writing soul, for my creative spark, right? Not for any other reason. That right now it's like healing. It's like this book might heal me. As soon as I gave myself that permission, it was like a grand piano dropped out of the sky into my head. And I wrote 240,000 words in like 5 months or 6. It's like May through October. It just like, bam. It was just like, and I can't, it was a bizarre experience. I never had a day where I couldn't write. I never had a day where I faltered. It just was like, oh, well, I need something to happen now, but these things have stuff lined up. The second half of the story, I had things I wanted to have happen that I said, well, I don't have to have them happen to get to the end, so I'll skip them. But when I turned the manuscript, and then I had the manuscript, and then we were able to sell it. And the first thing the editor said was, well, what they said is we will publish this as long as you split it into 2.
Yeah, I was about to ask that because, like, it at the ending, like, it ends, but it doesn't end in a way that, like, when I finished the book, I was like turning the page, but the next page is literal blank air because where the hell's the other part of the book?
It's a true duology in the sense that it is one story split into 2 volumes, and because I already had it written, the next book comes out in November, so it's
that
June,
is at
November.
Least a small
it's very
blessing.
Small. Yeah, it's a small
no, I mean
blessing.
In the sense of like it's nice that it's like, okay, I don't have to wait a whole year or 2 for the next book to come out, but I would just like you set up an incredibly intriguing premise of. I don't even know how much I can even say about the story.
Can I just add one thing though before we get to that very interesting question? That is that when you know how I said when I wrote the second half I cut things out, because they split it into 2, I could add all those back in.
Oh, nice.
And one of the things that I hadn't written in that second half is probably the thing that will make everybody cry in the second half. And so I'm so glad I got to put it back in.
Great. Love that for me.
Yeah. If anybody who doesn't cry or at least feel, anyway. So.
Yeah, if this turns out into being one of those, God, what the hell? Who is the author? Robin Hobb style novels where it's just misery and sadness, but they're the best things I've ever read.
It's its own thing. Robin Hobb's a fantastic writer, but I am not a Robin Hobb writer.
Yeah, she will make stones cry, right? Like her books can. Yeah. Anyways, the point is though, what I didn't like when I got this, I was just like, oh, cool, Kate Elliott. I'm going to read the book. Let's go. So. I'm going to give a brief premise here, and you can correct me if you want, but I'm trying to avoid spoilers and going on, is that in this world, there is this idea of spore, which is this weird invasive, like, I don't know,
Fungus.
fungus or something.
One of my writing group calls it the ravenous fungal ghost plague.
Yes, basically. And it just sits there, and the main character, Ellen's got this ability to find Spore and kill it for reasons that you will find out in the story. But basically what happens is when Spore touches things, they immediately become the most grotesque body horror, disgusting things of all time. And I am a person who does not do body horror well at all, period, ever. One of my dear friends, Shauna McGuire, keeps trying to give me her horror books, and they keep trying to mess me up. And I'm like, no, can't do that. Yeah. But like, I did not expect it, and I didn't see it coming. And I was just like, oh no, that mouse has 7 heads and is going to eat it. What's going on? And it's just like, and they just show up periodically in pockets, and it's just like the most grotesquely, like, what I appreciated was that even though, like, I didn't expect it, and you use it so sparingly, but the image and just the notion of it, suddenly I understand why everybody in this world is terrified of Spore. Like, I get it, and now this pall is hanging over me, and I'm like, oh, everything is bad, and you don't even need to, you just need to show me once. And I was just like, oh, this is terrifying. And the story is basically just like I keep, it is such an interesting interplay of characters and like back and forth. And when, I don't know, I've got a lot of questions I want to ask you offline about the way the thing ended, but it's just like, effectively, it's a story about class system and caste systems. It's a story about gender and roles in society. It's a story about like pollution and dealing and like how a fascist regime handles dealing with an external threat that is just something they can't fight. So you have to like, how do you regiment your society to survive this persistent plague? And just the hints and the vibe of the world that you're constructing through this is so cool. And
thank you.
Even like there's a magic system, but it is so far removed from the character whose perspective we're seeing that it's like we don't understand how it works or why, except in when there's conversation between people. And it's even then, it's just like the main character is just like, look, dude, I am who I am. I've got these things I deal with. I don't know anything about that. And I think that's a really, there's a lot of authors I know who would take that opportunity to have somebody monologue an entire, like, you know, D&D novel worth of like stats. But it's just like, I admire your restraint in sticking with Ellen and sticking with this point of view of like, she's got stuff about her that's very like, I was also like the fact that she's so hesitant to talk about her past and everything until the very end. And I should note for the listeners, this story is not a breeze. It's not a breezy read. There's a lot of, like, I'm not going to, I mean, I guess, yeah, there's things that if you're concerned about sexual violence or about like, things that are just like horrific like that, you should be wary a little bit, but not like it didn't stop me from reading the book, but it's definitely like, this book is a lot harder than I thought it would be going in.
So I appreciate I want to say something about there is, the body horror, which is very sparing, yes, and used very tactically in this story.
I agree.
Because indeed the Empire has created a number of mechanisms to limit the damage Spore can do. So on the one hand, good for them. And on the other hand, of course, it is a military empire. It was an empire founded through military conquest and control.
It feels very Asian.
Well, I mean, yes, because, I mean, it is and it isn't, but it is true that I have watched a lot of Korean and Chinese historical dramas, and that influence is definitely in there.
Oh, dude, I could see the guys in the different colored robes standing in front of the Empire. Yeah, I've watched a lot of Korean historicals too.
Yeah.
Yes, but
and then I will say that there is there's oh, that's tricky. There is no sexual assault on the page.
No,
there is suggestion of some. There is some that's referenced that happened in the past, and then there's some that happens off stage.
Yes.
in the moment. But I was very careful about that. And I was also very careful about what I was trying to do with the idea of gender. This is a society that's very hierarchical. Everybody is slotted into their place, but they have a place.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that the empire does. If you're a citizen, you get a profession and you do that profession, and that profession is important to the running of the empire. But people have
like
layers.
A very white aligned Marxist society.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But at that, but what I didn't want to do, because I could do it, but I'm tired of it, is make that. But one of the things that isn't, how do I say this? I wanted, so there's a lot of things on which hierarchy happens, but gender isn't one.
Yes.
So a prince, because I didn't want to use prince and princess, because those have completely different meanings. And
connotations. And
there will be a later book where I discuss the difference between a prince and a consort, not book 2 of the duology.
Oh, anyway. you like this world?
Never mind. No. So I didn't say anything. Just leave it on here. But I didn't say anything. It's not official yet.
Here, let me try to help you out here. In this world, titles are not gendered. There are princes and princes, and I like the way you describe it in the book, as in the prince has a consort. The consort has equipment that matches a prince, so they're not going to have children. Or, basically in this society, being gay is not a qualifier or even a signifier, anything at all. It is just, this is the choice you've made in your life. Who cares? Whatever, move on. Effectively the entire culture is bisexual.
Effectively, yeah.
Aggressively bisexual, and it's awesome. I think it's rad. And one of the main characters is transgendered, and it is literally just not a thing that matters in any way except being hey, I've made this decision. It's got ramifications on how I deal with my mom, which I thought was cute, and the way you handle that story. And I thought it was a really uplifting and wholesome, interesting way to do it in the midst of all this other horror that's going on in this book.
Well, that's and you'll. I don't want to. Oh, that would be.
You'll
note that the relationship between Ellen and her nephew is there's 2 core relationships in book 1, and then in book 2, and the relationship between Ellen and her nephew has a whole narrative arc in book 1 that is pretty much, without saying much more, it's pretty much there's a resolution for that, and that's why.
It's 2 people who don't know how to communicate at all and are terrified of communicating, get around to actually communicating.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to say is I really wanted to write a teenager. Not like I have a lot of respect for young adult. I've written a young adult trilogy, and it's a whole thing. I personally like young adult best when it's about teenagers being teenagers, not when it's about teenagers acting like people in their 20s and 30s and saving the world, but they're 16. I don't care for that. Other people do, and that's totally fine. I don't have an issue with
my
it.
favorite part was when at the end, when our teenager here is sitting there going something happens, and they turn to Ellen, and then they're like, whoa, and then they remember they're supposed to be mad at them and turn back away. And I was like, that is definitely a surly teenager.
One of my I have a couple of favorite scenes. The one where he confronts her, and then he says, "I'm mad at you," and then he keeps walking along beside her. Stump. He doesn't walk away. He keeps walking because he's a teenager, right?
And Ellen is so patient, but almost too patient, too cautious. But man, okay, you know what? It's so hard. You guys got to read this book. It's so good. I'm really intrigued for this world, and I'm very curious to see where the story goes, because I'm not happy with how it ended. Well, how it ended leaves me.
No, you're happy with how it ended, but you're not happy with how it ended.
I'm not happy. No, I think it's cool, but I'm just from a reader perspective of of engaged follower, I'm no,
exactly.
And it's I'm not oh, this is a bad book, but it's more no, I need to know what's happening right now.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
because Wow, that was a real. But I love the way you just described the different villages in the world and the traversing through the world. I mean, for all that, like I was like, I don't know that I expected action or anything like that, but it's effectively just these guys are going on a very long hike. But it is such
Yeah.
an engrossing hike that I was just like, wow, this is sick. This is
Well, I
really
mean,
really
there is
cool.
stuff going on
Well, yeah,
because of the
obviously,
palace
I'm being deeply
intrigue.
reductive.
Yes, but so there is action, but it is true that it is that book one, book two is a little different. The
Yeah.
second half is a little
Well,
different,
yeah, I'd
but the
hope
book
so.
one is effectively a long hike.
Yeah.
But it's a long hike with a lot going on. I made a couple of choices when I did it too, because I determined how many people in the ensemble cast can I manage to differentiate and let people get to know. So I
Yeah.
cut down, my piece by piece. I cut down the cast so I could just have a core of people who
Yeah,
we
I
could
like
get
that
to
they
know.
leave chunks of them behind as they're going.
Yeah, because you can't juggle all those people. And one of the things that was my core, um, one of my core wants for the story was that we see ordinary life as if it's meaningful. Because
Yes.
it is meaningful. So when we stop in villages, we get these glimpses of people who she knows and has
Yeah.
relationships
She's
with.
the local postal lady. Of course they know her.
Yeah, and that we see them, the reader will see them glimpse their life, where the guy says, "Here, my daughter made me this little lunch. Let me give it to you because I can see you're going to have to leave without a lunch."
You
And
told
that,
you
yeah,
you gave so much interesting world detail in these interactions that could have just been like, authorial text otherwise, where it's like, oh, because she's a low caste deputy courier, she doesn't get to eat with the prince and friends. So of course the guards are going to know that and they're going to give her a piece of lunch because they're like, hey, you might not get a break later because these guys just might forget that you need to pee. Also, in maybe a first in the fantasies I've read in my life, you literally have them pee every day. A lot. There's a lot of pee in this book. There's a lot of pee breaks. There's a lot of like the fact that you have a whole section at the end where like the one of the princesses gives the party new menstrual pads or whatever, and I was like, I ended up going on a deep dive of the history of feminine hygiene products to figure out about papyrus tampons from ancient Egypt or whatever. And I'm like, why am I
yeah,
reading it? But like,
yeah,
I appreciate so much these minuscule details that give life to a world. And like you and especially I think one of my favorite scenes is like they're with this prince and the prince has to get to this far border and the passage through Ellenstown has been blocked. Ellen being the courier who knows all the areas, she can take them on this shortcut goes around the place. And there's reasons why she wants to do this to escape some past mystery stuff. So she's taking this prince and his retinue through these insanely complicated hike to get to this location at the border of the empire. And as they're going through these backwoods, and you pass by these tiny little villages in the middle of nowhere, where this is a kingdom where the emperor apparently is a deity, or like is worshipped like a deity, or is
well,
treated
like
like,
China, like
yeah,
China.
right. And the thing is, as a person who comes from a society with like, a deep reverence for gurus and for like religious leaders and stuff, seeing all these villagers line up outside in the rain to wait for this man to just pass by, and like you have the scene of the prince just reaches out and touches the heads of all the children, and I just like became emotional during those scenes because it was so resonant of my own experiences of being like, when you go to a holy city where there's a guru or a sage or someone, and you're sitting there and you're waiting for him to give you your blessings, and he's walking by and you just want darshan, you want to see his eyes and get the know that you were seen as well, because that is like the reflection of deity within you and the acknowledgement of your existence. And then when he reaches out and touches you, everybody's around you's like, oh my god, you're so lucky, you've been
Yeah, yeah.
touched by the holy one. And like your prince is just sitting there and like he's going like, this doesn't mean anything to me, but I can see that this means something to them. And in doing so, it's such a humanizing
Well, the prince
moment.
is complicated by this time.
Yeah, the prince has got lots of things going on, but I just thought that
Yeah,
these small interactions were
yeah,
so deeply moving to me, and I was just like, wow, this is like, especially when he meets the old lady
yeah,
in that one
yeah.
village, and he's just like, no, she's like, the gods must have kept me alive to meet you, and he's like, no, 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 I am the lucky one to meet you because you have, the source of experience, and like you've lived so many lives in this time. And I was just like, wow, that is so sick. That's so good.
I want to thank you so much for picking out that particular thing, because that meant a huge amount to me to write, because I think that American writers can sometimes fall into this, and I'm very anti-aristocracy or whatever that means in an American context, right? But people have very different understandings of the world and how the world needs to be ordered. And we have different things that connect us to that world we live in. And that's what I wanted to bring out, that this was so deeply meaningful to these people. And I don't need to say, well, I'm going to, have an opinion about that. I need to see it through their eyes. And to see and it matters, in my mind as the writer, I'm thinking those children will remember that for the rest of their lives. The children who had their heads touched will be considered lucky and fortunate. And anything good that happens to them will be because the prince touched their heads and granted them blessing, and this can have ripples we may never, that I don't need to know about, but we will have ripples down the line.
Yeah. It's just because there's something about, like, you're right. There's a lot of stories and stuff that just gloss over what it's like to watch, like, I don't know, like if you're watching a Marvel movie and Hulk throws a plane through a building, you're not thinking about the poor guys who are sitting in that cubicle just going like, I'm just doing my taxes and the plane just came through and slaughtered my entire floor.
Yeah.
Like, we just never think about those guys. But because it gives so much depth and flavor to the world, and it gives you so much resonance and relatability to these characters. It's just like, I mean, look, I'm a religious person. I've come from a culture which is deeply, where it's like you're breathing religion and like respect in the air you're breathing, right? Like, it's just in the water. And having in one of the things about the West is we don't have this kind of reverence for people or positions or things like that, because the Enlightenment happened and we're all, unique snowflakes who can fight our own fights, whatever. Great. But that doesn't mean that the half the world for this has resonance doesn't exist. And we get forgotten a lot. And I'm like, you guys are all writing polytheisms as multiple aggressively angry monotheisms that don't like each other. I'm like, that's not how this works.
Exactly.
Like, this is in this culture. And I think you just develop this culture so interestingly and so fully that these small interactions, like, it's wild to me because this book is so short compared to so many doorstopper fantasies or video games or whatever, that you can, in like one paragraph, give me an entire scene of a whole other world that exists within this world that isn't relevant to the hike that they're going on, but gives me a glimpse outside of the boundaries of the map that we're walking. And that's really, really good. That's really cool. And obviously, you did that with the Bolas story too. You've just got this art of you lied in the beginning when you're like, I don't know how to write short stories, because the art of a short story is packing as much into as short and concise a spot as you can, but giving somebody an entire world out of one sentence. And in that, like when you look at Hemingway, one of my favorite Hemingway stories is literally this dude who's camping and he's making an onion sandwich, and he bites into he takes his knife out and he slices this onion and he puts it between the brown bread and bites into it. And the way that Hemingway writes this just sandwich is just like, you can smell the pungency, you can feel the bread, you know where it was baked, you understand the whole vibrancy of this sandwich that this idiot in the woods is eating. And that comes through in the kind of story that you're telling. You're like I could build an entire D&D campaign based on this story, just on the hints of what you've given about the world.
That makes me think that maybe if I had to describe a Kate Elliott story, I would say that a Kate Elliott story is grounded. It's grounded in the world. It's not sitting up here on top of it's not action and dialogue only, but it's grounded in the world. And there are some readers who who find that boring or it doesn't interest them, which is fine. There's no reason it ought to, but I can't write differently than that, because to me, if I can't see everybody in the world, and obviously I'm not going to write about everybody in a world, I have to pick and choose, but if I can only see some people as worthy of having a story told about them, then what is that? And, and who am I in that case? But everyone everyone potentially can be the seed of a story, because everyone is a seed who becomes a story. If I had to put it that, with that metaphor. And I always want all of my books, and it's true even of the Alexander Space Opera, because we see those other things. It isn't just about the people at the top. It's about the people at all levels. And we get glimpses at all levels of the life going on, and and that's one of the things that I really wanted to do with the Witch Roads duology, is show the people who are trudging along those paths and living those ordinary lives through the eyes of someone who sees them as people who matter.
Yes. That, I think, is my favorite thing about Ellen, the character, is that she has gone through insane trauma and insane, like, just things have happened to her in her life, and we are told and we see the glimpses of it as she goes. Yet she retains this essential optimism and this essential loving devotion of the people around her. Like, even when she's like, in the beginning, in the first chapter, she runs into this village and she's like, I don't want to deal with these people. It's late. It's tiring. I got to get out before it's nighttime. But it's my responsibility to talk to them. So I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to indulge these things. I know that guy's going to try to propose marriage to me. I'm just going to, shrug and smile and move on. But like everywhere through the books, she's just, no matter what situation it is, with like a few exceptions of terrifically evil people, she is always willing to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and give everybody the benefit of the inherent dignity of being a person. She doesn't concern herself with hierarchy, which is definitely a thing that comes up in the story a lot, where people are like, hey lady, you're talking way outside your tier here. And she's like, I guess I am. But it just, you just imbue her with such a joyful outlook in this drastically in this like just messed up world. And I'm like, damn, that is admirable and something we need these days.
I'm glad to hear it, because I think so too. And I don't think
because book 2 is going to rip that right out of her.
You're going to cry in book 2. But anyway, but not for the reason you think.
Oh, well.
Yeah, it's a good reason. But
we'll get there.
But that idea of the essential dignity of every person, to me, what that is so central. And, it's something that goes back to the early part of our conversation as well. I feel at the deepest level, at my most spiritual self, that we must treat every human being with dignity, because every person, and, at some level, deserves dignity. And that's, what makes me angry is to see people treated as pawns, or treated as evil, or treated as discardable, or treated as people who can have that plane blow through the whole floor, and that hundreds of people have died in a second, but it's not even mentionable because it's entertaining to watch the plane go through. And to me, this story is partly, it's a lot of things. I don't write a story for any one reason, but partly the Witch Roads is kind of my little answer to that. That all the people we meet along the way are people who have their own lives and, who live them as best they can.
It's hard to read without seeing the context through the lens of the world you live in right now.
It's impossible to. We don't write, like, I don't even believe in historical fiction, in the sense that I don't think historical fiction written today reflects history. It reflects now, and it's using historical time as the template on which to reflect our concerns today. And I think that's fine. I think that's all we do. We talk. Artists work in the now. We always work in the now.
Yeah.
And that's what makes art so valuable.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to call this a day.
Okay.
Otherwise, you and I could sit and talk for like another 4 hours, I think.
I think so. Well, remember, the second book comes out in November, so I'm available.
Look, I will say this much. I guarantee you the audience is going to love this, and that we're probably Like I will probably get some nasty notes saying, "Why'd you cut her off, dude?"
Well, I do have to work today. I do have to write my 2,000 words. That's my kind of like steady state rate.
Yeah, like I've blown through the appointment I had at 1:00, and so it's
oh my gosh, yeah,
it's just well, guess I'm gonna send them a nice note later. But thank you so much for joining me. This has been so wonderful.
So much. It has been. It's been fantastic.
I genuinely loved Witch Roads. I thought it was a really fantastic book, and like I said, I'm very eager to read the next one. But when does this come out? And I guess June. This is the plug time. So tell people where they can find your books and you and all the things.
The Witch Roads releases on June 10th, 2025. It may appear in bookstores earlier. It's available. It should be available in all bookstores. It's available on all platforms. The ebook and the hardcover are coming out on June 10th. An audio version will follow in August via Tantor Media, and it will also be available on Audible and all platforms like that.
Cool.
And it is the first of a duology, and the second one is coming in November, so no long wait. It's kind of bam, bam. And the second one is called The Nameless Land, which will mean something to you.
It sure does.
Yeah.
Boy,
right?
does it. Let me tell you. And also you can find her at Kate Elliott, basically. Just look for it. She's written a billion books. She's on your sundry social medias. A very, very cool person.
I'm only on Blue Sky, I have to say. Yeah. Well, yes. I've like basically dumped everything else. I have a secret Discord that people can search for and find if they look for it.
Yeah, I have too many Discords. I don't need
exactly.
I don't need another. But yeah, again, thank you so much for joining me. As always, my friends, you can find me at Shivam Bhatt on Blue Sky. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at YouTube every Tuesday. Thanks to my editor, Dan. You can also hear me on Shivam and Wheeler Love Magic, or the Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast, which just ended its second season, when we're going to be putting up an interview with the game designer and author Jeff Grubb, which is super cool. But remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we'll see you next time.